And now I will carry on with a reading of the rest of chapter 2. So the years of 1987 to 1989 were pretty intense and traumatic, to say the least. After the whole disaster of the failed cattle ranch and us being in great financial trouble, both my parents ended up being diagnosed with depression and were admitted to the Tara Psychiatric Hospital in Johannesburg, South Africa. The question would be, what would happen to us children who were still living at home with our parents? Because you see, our two older siblings were already out of the house by those years, and they were studying at university to become teachers. Luckily, my parents had some very good friends who were very generous and gracious, and they decided to take us in for the period of time that my parents were in the psychiatric hospital. I was, of course, immediately comfortable living with them, as they had a huge double-story house with a swimming pool, a hot tub, and they drove a very fancy Mercedes-Benz. Now, this was more the kind of life that I could get used to, I thought. They were living the lifestyle that my father aspired to. Where we were struggling to make ends meet, this family was doing pretty well, having owned their own business and making a success of it. In this time, I had many fantasies of being adopted by this family and living with them for the rest of my life, for I really did not know what was going to happen with my parents. There weren't any concerns about money or food, and we were shown the kind of life that we had always dreamed of. But in the end, things had to go back to normal. My parents were eventually discharged after some months of psychiatric therapy, and we had to return home with them. This was very hard for me, as I'd become used to living with this other family. They were very kind to us and loved us as if we were their own children. My parents were also not the same when we arrived back home with them, since both of them had received shock therapy while in the psychiatric hospital, and they were still on the road to recovery. But, very importantly, I want to share that life on the plot and in my family was not all doom and gloom. There were good times too, and I have very fond memories of our family. Aside from my parents' health issues and my father's alcoholic problem, we were a reasonably happy family. We had two loving parents who, by the grace of God, did have the best intentions for us in their decisions that they made. My father was a kind and a loving man when he was not under the influence of alcohol, and my mother was an amazing mother who always prayed for us and did her best to raise us in the fear of God. Yes, my father's business decisions weren't always great, but his desire for us as a family was to achieve success and to live a good life. He at least tried to come up with some kind of a plan to provide for us, and I do have respect for him. I always have empathy with him after he had lost the woman he had married to the illness of paranoia schizophrenia. But in the end, I believe he struggled to make wise decisions due to the fact that he did not fully trust and obey Jesus Christ. Even the best intentions of us as humans will always fall short of God's intentions if we are not rooted in and reliant on Him to provide for us. But to get back to some of the fond memories, I remember days of playing backyard cricket with my dad and my brothers. We were a very competitive group of brothers, and of course my father was the one who had introduced us to these competitive team sports. Backyard cricket was something we all loved, and my older siblings were great cricket players, and they taught me how to play the game from when I was very little. The only problem with me was that I was a very bad loser. I didn't like to lose, and I didn't like to be bowled out when I was batting. For all my Canadian friends, that is like a strikeout in baseball. I would then cry, have a meltdown, and of course my older brothers would give me another chance. And one time they had given me 4 or 5 chances to bat, and once again I got bowled out, and I was so cross that I picked up the cricket ball, threw it wildly at the house, and smashed one of the big windows. Everyone just froze, and I started screaming and bawling my eyes out as I realized I was now in big trouble.